very relevant topic. So the ESG world connected to cybersecurity. In the last period, while cybersecurity has mainly been viewed as a technology issue, it is now also regarded as a key environmental, social, and governance, so ESG concern, falling under the social pillar. Particularly, ESG framework are a tangible means of evaluating corporate behavior. By incorporating cybersecurity, a new dimension is added, giving insight into cyber behaviors and risk, which form a critical part of the bigger ESG picture, in my opinion. So a company's bottom line is no longer a board of directors' sole concern. In many cases, financial performance issues has been partially set aside to allow space to focus on ESG concern, as a board of directors become increasingly focused on these issues. Obviously, that cybersecurity is strongly connected to the S and G elements of ESG. Indeed, for example, a company relationship with this customer can be severely damaged if data becomes public, for example. Then the ties into wider issues of privacy and security, including issue about who should be assessing and controlling data. Indeed, the breaches can have an impact on trust and loyalty, and a high-profile breach can destroy investor confidence. So cybersecurity is, in my opinion, is also very key to a company's relationship with its employees. For example, breaches of employee data are often more common, but at the same time, providing training in cybersecurity is becoming more important for employers. So in other words, cybersecurity practice are absolutely, in my opinion, an ESG issues as well as business risk issue. For example, if we look to the environmental aspect, cybersecurity reflects environmental issues. For example, smart city provide a lot of potential for sustainability. Street lamp that turn on only when somebody is in the area, on-demand public transportation, and even electric vehicles can all save a lot of energy. But the issue related to cyber attacks to all these items cannot be undervalued. If the environmental aspect of cybersecurity is relevant, the social element, so the second element of ESG, is also relevant as the first one. The targets of cybersecurity attacks include all sectors, from finance and information to manufacturing and education. And a security breach can affect the company in many ways. Firstly, the cost of external consequences of cyber attacks can be in millions. For example, in 2018, the average annual cost was $5.9 million for information lost, $4 million for business disruption, $2.6 million for equipment damages, and $500,000 for revenues lost. So a lot of money. And another aspect of a cyber attack is the impact it can have on the company reputation. With social media accelerating the spread of information and rumors, the risk of getting and keeping a bad reputation has increased tremendously. And the cybersecurity policy should really inform what the company knows about its security and what it will do in the case of cyber attack. Besides the cybersecurity policy, companies should also have compulsory and continuous training program to also ensure investor confidence. When it comes to governance, the G of the ESG, the company should ensure, in my humble point of view, that the right people are in place to oversee risk assessment. In fact, the company board should also be fully involved in overseeing personnel selection and implementation of the policy. In 2019, a responsible investment survey by RBG Global Asset Management stated that cybersecurity was the #1 ESG risk of great concern to investors. So typically, cyber resilience resides under the governance umbrella of ESG, as breaches typically expose operational risks that fall under management's purview. how seemingly intangible concern can lead to very tangible consequences to a company's bottom line. Especially because the attack also affected 150 million Equifax customers, thereby underscoring its social impact. These breaches damaged public trust in corporation, institution, and infrastructure, and affected many millions of people. For businesses, cyber attacks have the potential to erode customer trust, erode customer loyalty, as well as a company brand. Taking to extreme, I see that a cyber breach can threaten a company's reputation, the sustainability of its earnings, and even lead to a regulatory intervention and legal sanction. But more importantly, close monitoring of various ESG and technology factors enables better data security, business model resilience, and critical incident risk management, thereby benefiting a broad range of stakeholders. To be more practical, companies should consider to conduct, for example, a cybersecurity assessment. A cybersecurity assessment identifies the various information assets that could be affected by cyber attack, such hardware, systems, laptops, customer data, intellectual property, and so on, and then identifies the various risks that could affect those assets. And a risk estimation and evaluation are usually performed, followed by the selection of controls to track the identified risk. So it's important to continually monitor and review the risk environment to detect any changes in the context of the organization and to maintain an overview of the complete risk management process. So the conduct a cybersecurity assessment is not enough. You have to create also cybersecurity strategy and policy, for example. In particular, digital governance involves the creation and monitoring of strategy and policies for investments in and use of digital technology across an organization. So the increasing power of computers combined with lower prices means that digital technology is now ubiquitous. This policy typically defines staff roles, the responsibilities in handling an incident, standard and metrics, incident reporting, remediation effort, feedback mechanism, and so on. So it's a very relevant, important policy that we have to implement in our structure to manage and to pay the right attention to the G element of ESG. But it's not enough. Again, we also have to take into consideration to draft also a disaster recovery plan that is developed as a part of a larger business continuity plan, which includes both cybersecurity and IT teams' recommendation. The assigned teams will then manage an incident through the data breach response policy. However, the business continuity plan is activated only when the incident has a significant impact on the organization. And another one is obviously the business continuity plan that describes how the organization will operate in an emergency and coordinated efforts across the organization. And additionally, the business continuity plan will work in conjunction, obviously, with the disaster recovery plan to restore hardware, application, data that are considered essential for business continuity. And again, another type of policy should be the remote access policy. Unfortunately, we still are inside of COVID-19 emergency. So remote working during the COVID-19 increased data breach costs. An organization must implement, but I can say that must implement a remote access policy that outlines and defines procedures to remotely access the organization's internal networks. An organization will require this policy when there are dispersed network with the ability to extend into unsecure network location, such as, for example, home networks or coffee shops or streets or squares in the city and so on. The last policy that I would like to pinpoint and to take to your attention is the access control policy. So an access control policy, or ACP, defines the standard for user access, network access control, system software controls. Additional supplementary items often include techniques for monitoring how systems are accessed and used, how access is removed, for example, when an employee leaves the organization, and how an attended workstation should be secured. So these 6 policies I see to be very practical. Again, I will give you a practical approach to the how I see the cybersecurity inside of ESG world, in particular from the governance point of view. These six policies are very relevant in my opinion. That is a fundamental to create, to put inside of our ESG model when we look at cybersecurity. Data traceability system is strictly connected to cybersecurity issue, and are the technical measures that should be in place to manage proper data and business information collection and processing, including mapping legal requirements to policies, mapping policies to technical mechanisms, requiring explicit user content for all collected personal data, updating user personal data to maintain its accuracy, disclosing personal data according to user control preferencing, and so on. Data traceability requires the collaboration of all companies that has 2 components: the tracking components and the tracing components. The tracking is the capability to record the path of data as it gets shared with other company other than the source company that collected the data. Tracing is the capability to identify the origin of data, and needless to say, tracing will only be successful with properly implemented tracking system. So data traceability systems are fundamental in our ISG model. The last element, this summary of elements, sorry again to be fast, is the cybersecurity audits. Cybersecurity audits are about assessing compliance. Agencies that conduct a cybersecurity audit will be able to assess whether or not they have the proper security mechanism in place, while also making sure they are in compliance with the relevant regulation. Particularly, cybersecurity audits are performed by usually third-party vendors to eliminate any conflict of interest, and they include all control sets, management practice and governance, risk and compliance, provision enforced at the enterprise level. So there are several best practices that should be taken ahead of and during a cybersecurity audit, especially if this is being conducted by a trusted third party. So it's a very complicated task, but it's a fundamental, trust me, fundamental task that we must implement in our ISG model if we want to start taking into right consideration the cybersecurity element of the IC in our ESG model.